When talking about high availability, disaster recovery, and in general, whatever could go wrong and being able to plan for that, one of the concepts that's really helped me in the past is something called FMEA, Failure Modes and Effects Analysis. And FMEA was created in the late 50s to study problems that might arise from malfunctions of military systems. But since then, it's been adopted by a wide range of businesses, everything from manufacturing to healthcare to financial services. Really, all it is just a systematic process to examine what could go wrong, what impact it might have, what's the likelihood, and what's our ability to detect it. And then ultimately, what should we do about that to either reduce the risk or position ourselves such that we can react to that? In general, you create a formula, and there are several types of formulas that some people use. This is one that I like to use. Takes the severity of the situation or the problem, multiply it by the probability, then multiply that by our ability to detect it. And that's going to come together to create something called a risk priority number, or RPN. And the formula itself is really arbitrary. It just is a way to compound three different aspects into one. Some people also use this formula here, where it's severity times probability plus detection. So step one is first look at all your processes, your critical processes. And generally speaking, companies do this in a top-down approach. We'll start with invoicing here, for example, and then we'll go in and decide what are all the different things that could happen in that invoicing process to create problems for us. So here we've said that one of the failure modes is pricing is unavailable, or pricing is incorrect, or our systems are slow to build the invoice, or we can't build an invoice. And then we try to figure out, okay, what would cause that particular thing? And we should also make note of any sort of current controls, any sort of ways that we have to detect those problems before they create difficulty for a customer or ourselves. So once we've gone through and decided what are all the things that could go wrong and what the causes are, then we can go back and we can rate their impact and their likelihood and our ability to detect them and react to them. So in this case, a higher number is worse. A lower number is less. For this case, in pricing unavailable, the customer impact's pretty high at a 7, but the likelihood is on the lower side. And because we already have controls in place, we can pretty easily detect that. So that comes to a risk priority number of 42. Then what we can do is take those RPN numbers and see what's the highest one. Generally speaking, we'll work from the highest down to try to implement mitigation plans or additional redundancies or additional processes around that potential problem so that we can try to keep it from happening or at least reduce that RPN number. And in this case, since incorrect pricing seems to have a high customer impact and is not really detectable with our current processes, it's resulted in a high RPN. So we should probably try to do some analysis around that to see if we could lower that risk. Now here's an example of a real-world FMEA sheet that I did at another customer. I just wanted to show you that these FMEA sheets can get pretty complex at times. Now you can see in this case, we started with a macro process, and then we go into a process, then we have functions within that process. And here's the failure modes. And then we do the customer severity ratings, the occurrence ratings, and the detection. And in this case, our scale is 1 is no impact, 10 is worst customer impact. And you can see how we just assign these values. And then through using a formula, we define the risk priority number. Now in this case, I've also included the specific interface that was relevant to that process. And we can also fill in some recommended actions, and maybe we want to assign somebody to be responsible for developing a mitigation plan around this risk, and then record what action was taken. So another way to go about this is you can take a system and then go through the different disaster categories. And this is just a way to generate some thoughts and to get people thinking. In this case, infrastructure has the highest threat because perhaps there's not much we can do if a utility crew cuts our fiber optic data line. So we might just have to accept that. But we should most certainly do something around the failure mode of credential expiration. Maybe in this case, it was our SSL TLS cert expiring. Well, in that case, we can definitely make use of AWS Certificate Manager to manage our certs because Certificate Manager is going to automatically renew those and not get us into that situation. And so just by doing that, we would significantly lower the likelihood of our certificate expiring. And it also reduces the risk of not detecting or reacting to it. Once we decided we're going to use Certificate Manager to mitigate that particular risk, then we turn our attention to maybe the next highest priority, which in this case is in the dependency area.